I'm speaking to the wonderful Eleanor Akaho, who is a psychiatrist, personal performance coach, mentor for women and girls. She's also passionate about lifestyle design and helping people achieve their goals. Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Oh, it's absolutely lovely to have you. Thank you for coming on. I always like to ask any of my guests to say a little bit more about themselves, not just about work, but also outside work as well. So, any passions that you have, that kind of thing.
Okay. So I graduated as a medical doctor in 2011 and then as a psychiatrist in 2016. I then did my coaching diploma. So very, very passionate about helping people live the lives that they want to. And I do coaching and also mentoring for women and girls. Um, And I would say, yeah, I'd say for the past 5 years or so, I've worked really hard on curating the kind of lifestyle that I want to lead kind of long
Mm,
term. So I'm 37 at the moment, and I'm always thinking ahead into the future and thinking, do I want to be living my life like this at 40, at 50, at 60, etc. So because of that, I am really passionate about also helping other people just figure out life, really figure out how they want to be living and at least feel comforted knowing that they're walking in that direction. And, like every year you're kind of closer to how you would like your lifestyle to be. Um, Other than that, I am also very passionate about personal finance. So I spend a lot of time listening to personal finance shows and kind of understanding how money impacts different aspects of life, whether it's your health, your relationships, friendships, career choices. Um, and I love doing like brain puzzles, anything logical and kind of connecting words and numbers and things like that. I love to do. Love reading, spend a lot of time listening to audiobooks and podcasts as well. So yeah, just a lot of really quiet, solitary kind of activities are definitely my thing.
mm. Thank you for that. And you saying about having been designing your own life over recent years, and I'm proud to call you my friend, and I've been sort of a witness to that. And I know that how you are pretty successful at doing that, but also with these things, there are always sort of bumps in the road and renegotiations and that kind of thing. So, could you tell me then, what do you think, what are the common misconceptions about lifestyle design, would you say?
I would say one is that you need to live your life a certain way. And I think even if we don't get direct messaging about that, we get a lot of input from other people, whether it's people within our professions, people in our personal lives. We get a lot of input about what we should be doing, how we should be doing it, when and where we should do it. And I think that these things limit our vision in many ways because
Mm,
it leads to us being kind of unable to see outside of the box or kind of see beyond what everyone else is saying and doing. So I think that one of the misconceptions is, there's a certain way to do it and I need to, fall in line or
yeah.
follow that. Um, I think another one is just being, I think within certain professions, we are known, for example, counselors and therapists, coaches, psychiatrists, we're known for being caring and giving and almost self-sacrificing. And I think one of the misconceptions is that we need to do that even when it comes to how we set up businesses or, who we work with. We want to look after everyone all the time, do everything. And I think one of the things that affects our life design is, really just trying to be everything to everyone. And I think
Mm,
once we realize we wouldn't advise that for other people, and that's a lot of the reason why many people come to us, then I think it helps us think actually, I need to live by example and not live that kind of life, in trying to serve other people.
yeah, yeah, and that's definitely something that's very close to my heart and something that's very much part of Counsellors Therapy Pot ethos. The idea that actually it sounds like a cliche, but it's absolutely true that we do need to look after ourselves before looking after others. But I think that sometimes we don't always realize the ways in which we're compromising ourselves because it can be quite subtle, I
Mm.
think, especially when you do our type of work.
Yeah, I agree.
So, what would you say are the key things to remember about designing your life?
I think I would say to start with thinking about your values. So this is useful for anyone who is just starting out in terms of their career, but also anyone who has kind of dived in, feels very overwhelmed right now. You know, everything is spinning around you. And if it feels like it's all about to fall, I'd say let it fall and then decide really intentionally what you're going to pick up again. And I think I would start with values because if we build our lives and our lifestyles around those things, then I think we're more likely to be happier and healthier in the future. So things like, you know, what do I care about most? Do I care about flexibility or do I care about structure? You know, do I want to see the same person, same time every week? Or am I more of a, you know, I will let you, you know, pick as and when you're seeing me? Do I want to, you know, have a lot of freedom and ability to work either abroad or in different settings all the time? You know, do I crave that sense of adventure, or am I somebody who really wants to keep things, you know, as much the same as possible? So I think thinking about what is important to you just as a person, even before you put yourself into the context of a professional, I think it's really, really important. I think also thinking about your energy levels because we are
Mm.
we're so different. I am someone who will naturally wake up at, you know, 4, 5 a.m. without an alarm. And I know that is not most people. But for example, if I was doing counseling or therapy, I would be thinking about some of those early morning people who would rather have their session early in the morning and then go about their day, maybe because it's quieter in their household or they're not able to take time off work and, you know, things along those lines. So that would be me, whereas someone else would be saying, you know, hell no to 5 a.m. or, you know, a 6 a.m. session or something. And they would be thinking more of, you know, I'm a middle of the day person or I'm an evening person. So I think thinking when you've got the most energy to kind of fully be invested in the work that you're doing, um, also thinking about things like what else are you trying to embed in your day in order to have a good day for the rest of the day. So if you're somebody who does exercising, for example, and you want to exercise in the morning, no point of saying, right, I'm starting at 8 a.m. if you know that you're not fully awake, fed, exercised, you know, all of those by that time. So really just it sounds very basic, but we actually end up building these things around other people rather than saying, this is how I want things to be for myself. And then saying, because of that, I'm now going to start at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the mornings because I need to do all the things for me and feel like I've poured into myself before pouring into others. So I would definitely start there with values and with energy levels as well. Um,
Mm.
and then also kind of thinking where, you know, where and when and how I'd want to be working. Um, I would also be thinking about things like my timetable. Am I leaving enough buffer time? So
Mm.
sometimes I feel like it can sometimes be financially driven, but I think a lot of the time it's just because we haven't really thought it through. But we will
Yeah.
have back-to-back appointments and then wonder why we're just shattered at the end of the day. And I think small things like, you know, 15 minutes or 30 minutes buffer time, even if it's between like every two clients rather than every, you know, every client, it can make such a big difference. And someone who found that, you know, they're really tired by 3 p.m., for example, could find actually I could go on to 6 p.m. if I had those few breaks. So I think thinking about those sort of things when we're timetabling as well can make a big difference. And also talking about breaks throughout the day, I'm also thinking about breaks when it comes to kind of like every few months or every few weeks. It's funny because I was having a conversation with one of the psychiatrists I work with, and I said to her, you know, by the time I get to kind of 8 to 10 weeks of doing our job, I get very irritable, and I just kind of that kind of compassion fatigue starts to rise
Mm,
up. And I was
yeah.
like, you know, like that's why I've started booking breaks kind of every 10 to 12 weeks sort of thing. And she was like, 10 weeks, you know, for me, it's about three. So she said, you know, my fourth week is always a bit lighter than my first 3 weeks. And part of the reason is because I realize that my energy levels are dwindling. So you know, like that's the time for me to think, okay, if I could do half day or, you know, just really thinking about where am I by that point mentally. So it's
Yeah.
not just your physical energy, it's also what's your mental state like. So I'd say that those are really good kind of person-centered places to begin.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's so important to listen to our body, isn't it? Because it does tell us things, and we don't always take notice of it, but it's so important to do that because otherwise, you know, we might suffer the consequences down the line. And that's what I was thinking of really when you said about listening to your body, and you know that after a certain number of weeks that you're going
Mm.
to need to have a break. I think that's really important. If we could go back a little bit to the values side of things. So what about the person who's sitting there thinking, Eleanor, I don't know what my values are. How could they find out?
That's a really good question. And it takes me back to one of the coaching exercises that I did when I was training, where they kind of gave you about 20 or 30 different words. And you just had to firstly just circle any that were kind of any that resonated with you. And then you had to cut it down and think, okay, if I had to prioritize it, what would I put near the top? And I think one of the things we've talked about before is like conflicting values, where you have two things that you hold dear and like you know which one do you honor in a certain situation. So I think it would be a case of, you know, say you start with 20, you cut it down to 10, you cut it down to 5, thinking, okay, which 3 to 5 are important to me. But I think it's always important to know what is your number one value, like the thing you absolutely won't compromise
Yeah,
on. I think for me, I would say freedom, which it's really fitting in terms of thinking about lifestyle design.
yeah,
Compassion is very close, you know, as a second. But for me, I feel like if I don't have a sense of freedom, it's hard for the compassion to be there kind of at the level that it normally would be. So I've kind of really sat down and thought which one matters. We're really lucky these days. We can Google values, we can look on ChatGPT, you know, like these things. We can easily kind of access a list of different values
mm,
and then start to narrow those down. But I think another way to approach that is actually thinking about examples from your life. You know, when I had to choose between this thing and that thing, what did I choose? Why did I choose it? You know, when I had this dilemma, or when I had this decision to make at work, or you know, even within relationships and friendships, when I had to do this or this, I chose this. Why did I choose that one? That also really helps you to understand yourself better when it comes to what your values are.
yes, yes, absolutely. And I was just reminiscing a little bit there because just to mention, because obviously the listeners won't know, but that's how me and Eleanor met actually. It was when we were doing our coaching training. So I was just remembering those exercises about values. They were so helpful. I know, for instance, there's a good uh, one list that's out there is the Brené Brown list, actually. That's quite often one that I refer to. But something I was thinking as you were just talking about values is, you know, having, because you mentioned the value of compassion there being very important to you. And there's also values, including being sort of caring and having respect and things like that. And something that I'd really like to say is that how important it is to reverse that and use it on ourselves as well. Because I think that when people are talking about values, they think of, well, how does it sort of what does it mean about how I treat others? But actually, it also should speak to how we treat ourselves as well.
Yeah, I really like that.
So, self-compassion is just as important as compassion for others, and self-respect and self-care. And, and it fits in nicely with what we were saying about, when we design our life, it's just, it's important to think about what actually we want
Mm.
rather than sort of always fitting in with others, which can, as in sort of nurturing professions,
Mm.
that can, we can sometimes be tempted to sort of fit in with others as a nurturer, I think.
Yeah. And I'd say off the back of that, also not being afraid to say that something comes above compassion. Because I feel like in the jobs we do, because we feel
Mm,
like, that's the number one thing about us that's even led us to the profession, it feels so hard to say, actually, I value freedom more. But I've had to really look at my life and some decisions I've made and things along those lines. And even when I have valued compassion kind of more highly than everything else, I've had to think, why was it difficult in that situation? There was a time where I was working full time and I had a family member in hospital, and I was dashing to the hospital every single day afterwards. And it was already kind of a 1.5 hour sort of journey to and from. Um, so just kind of thinking, I prioritize compassion, but what was it that really made it so hard? Well, I didn't have any freedom. I didn't feel like I had any say in how my evenings would be spent.
mm,
So
yeah.
we might choose compassion sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. But I think it's worth us then reflecting on that and thinking, did I feel the best that I could in that situation? And if not, why not? Was there another value that I put to the side in order to honor that one? So yeah, I think as nurturers, we need to really think about, you know, what else is more important than compassion even in certain situations.
Yes, yes, I really agree with you. And something else I was thinking about as you were talking before about counselors and therapists and those kind of professionals designing their life. There's also people listening who sort of have a paid role, sort of either shift work or 9 to 5. So what would you like to say to those people?
Mm. I'd like to say that they can also still think about lifestyle design, even if they feel like, it's already set out for them. So if I give an example, I've had well, I was going to say 9 to 5, but I've had a paid kind of salary job for a long time, and I only kind of recently stepped out of that. Um, and there was a point where I decided that I was going to do compressed hours. And this was way before anybody was really thinking about it. This was back in 2016, 2017. And I just asked them, can I do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 8 till 6? And that was agreed. So then I was able to take the Wednesday off. And it made such a difference. Like I can't even describe how good it felt to only ever be working 2 days in a row and then have that third day, rest, and then come back, do 2 days, and then have the weekend. And I just felt like this is something that might be possible for a lot of salaried people who currently do 9 to 5, 5 days a week, but people haven't necessarily even thought to ask for it because it's not the norm. And anytime I've suggested this to someone, they've been like, "Oh my gosh, like I didn't think of that." And my employer's really nice; they probably would have said yes to it. I think there are very few jobs where your presence 5 days a week or however many days you work is kind of super, super important. For example, with nurses, I think it'd be a lot more difficult, but then they are also kind of working long days and can and have to actually schedule certain days in. So for them, it's already sort of built in. But I think for other people, whether you're an office worker or carer in some way, it's not always the first thing that you think about, but it is possible.
Mm, yes, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. And this may sound like a bit of an obvious kind of question, but I think it's important to sort of raise it. What would you say are the advantages of intentionally designing your life? What can it bring to somebody, would you say?
I think it can bring a lot of peace and satisfaction, a sense of empowerment that you do have some level of control over your life. It can help you avoid burnout, which I have experienced and I know it's not nice. So I think just steering away from that, and burnout comes really kind of insidiously in terms of you're just living your life, doing what you think you need to be doing, and suddenly you're feeling physically or psychologically in a completely different place and you don't know where it came from. And I think trying to avoid those sort of scenarios is really important. Um, so yeah, I think designing your life can just make you feel empowered as a person, I think. And if you are walking into the workplace and doing your job with a sense of empowerment, I think it means that you can serve other people better, and you're not doing it from a place of any resentment or feeling trapped or feeling um forced in any way. Maybe that just comes back down to my personal value of freedom, but I think for a lot of people that is it is something a lot of people want in work and in life in general, knowing that you're doing things on your own terms.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And actually, I think it's really important when we do the kind of jobs that we do to model sort of good boundary setting and intentional living and
Mm.
that kind of thing, because that is ultimately what we want for our clients
Yeah.
as well. But if we are sort of, I don't know, say for instance, with clients, they sort of try and change the time at the last minute or something like
Mm.
that, or they want a cut in price or something like that. I think it's really important to consider those kind of things
Yeah.
carefully, because actually we're modeling the boundaries to somebody who might be better off seeing different value, boundaries being modeled.
Yeah. And I would say along those lines, thinking about the structure and the boundaries we bring to the way that we're designing our lives, there might be things like, I think a lot of people think counseling and therapy is literally sitting down with the with the client. Unfortunately, there is a lot of paperwork and lots of stuff to be doing. And I think actually saying, look, Monday afternoons is going to be my admin time, and you do that every week. So there's no, it takes the stress out of, oh, when am I going to do this, when do I have time to do this thing,
Mm,
because you've already mapped out, okay, this is when I'm going to do admin, this is when I'm going to respond to new queries or people wanting to register. This is when I'm going to make phone calls or work on advertising. I think just having a rough plan for when you're going to do things can take out a lot of the decision making, which contributes to the sense of fatigue that you have as well. And that
yeah.
is part of building your lifestyle. And I think just automating things as well. I think so
Mm,
many different personalities get drawn to the kind of work that we do. Some people are naturally kind of admin orientated and very particular about how they do things, and other people are more go with the flow. But I think to some degree, even the go with the flow ones might want to use that energy on something different than the stress of dealing with admin. So it might benefit them to automate certain things. And, if you have a newsletter or if you have, certain payments that come out of your account for your business or anything like that, that can just be automated. So it's one less thing out of the gazillions of things to think about. I think that can also help you to shape your lifestyle, because then rather than spending, let's say, 50% of your time dealing with all of these things, it might be dropped down to 30% or less. So I think these things can make a huge difference.
yes, yeah, I agree. And I know with me, particularly in light of Counsellors Therapy Pot and doing that work there, we are starting to automate things more. And I've never considered myself a very technical person at all, but I've been learning to do lots of different things recently. And for anybody at home sort of think, oh God, I can't do that. I feel your pain. I absolutely get it. But it is just getting over that initial hurdle, and then you do find it easier up, after once you've done it, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, what would be, do you have any sort of tips for automation and administration? Because I know that that's a really big strength of yours.
Yes, I love these things. I've always been a list maker ever since I was a kid, and I think it surprised some adults as well when they were just like, "Oh, she's already kind of set on what she's doing." I think making lists is important, either at the end of the day in advance for the next day, so that you go to bed without thinking about all the millions of things you need to do, or waking up in the morning, starting the day, just taking stock of the things that need to be done. I think really helps. I love to tick things off, cross things out, so I think being able to do that. I think things like, so for me, I like to use a platform called Focusmate, which is like a co-working site, and you can book like 25, 50, or 75 minutes. So things like, okay, I know I've got appointments at these certain times, and then I'm going to have this period in between to do key admin. I like to book those slots ahead of time. You can book like up to 10 or something, for 10 weeks, I mean. So just having that slot already in the calendar for the next few weeks, and then knowing within that slot every week I'm going to be doing this particular task, whether it's calling people, emails, etc. So I think something like that. Um, Definitely looking at any regular payments that I'm making. Do I need to set up a bunch of standing orders slash direct debits? In terms of chasing payment as well, do I have a set way to do that? Are there certain programs that I can be using, like Calendly, I think is quite a good one, where people can book in the slots themselves. You put your availabilities on there, they book it in, and then you kind of know, okay, this goes automatically into my calendar. So all that time that you'd be spending thinking, okay, I need to look at the message they sent me, and then I need to check my Google Calendar, and then I'll get back to them, and then all of that kind of gets erased. So I think programs like that, we're so lucky these days. I think we don't realize how lucky, but we have so many things already in place, and it takes very little kind of technical skills to be able to set up those sort of things.
Yes, yeah. And you talking about Focusmate just there. I mean, I've used that sometimes as well. And I think things like that are just so helpful in terms of scheduling. Because if you've got a Focusmate booked for 3 o'clock or something like that, you're just so much more likely to actually go and do the thing you were going to do rather
Yeah.
than, oh, do you know what? Actually, I'm just going to go and put the washing on, or that person over there needs some help with something, so I'm just going to do that instead, or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. I think it helps to keep us honest and on track. I would like to ask you what you would say to someone who cites the current sort of economic situation as a reason why designing their life would be impossible at the moment.
No, I think that's a really valid question. And I think we are living in really stressful times with cost of living crisis and things just continuously changing with inflation rates and things along those lines. Um, I think one thing I would say is that some of these problems have always been there in the background or have been there for other generations as well. So, yes, in some ways our situation is unique, and then in other ways it's not. And we because it's ever changing, I feel like we can't build our lives around what is going on at any one moment. So I feel like we need to value our own well-being above everything else. We are not going to be well enough to see 20 people a day, for example, just for the financial aspect of things. We still need to just kind of think about what's the basic of what we need, and then what are a few extras we can add in bit by bit, rather than going at it from a we're in crisis, everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
I just need to do anything and everything that I can do. And I think that because it's such a wax and wane sort of situation, things will get better at some point, and you don't want the economic climate to be better but you to be struggling because of the commitments that you made when things were less good. So I think you need to find a middle ground in terms of what can I build that's sustainable and that I'm happy with in any kind of weather or any kind of season, from a financial perspective.
Yes, yeah, I think that's very true. And sort of on that point, you know, community is very important to us here, and I think it's very important for counsellors generally, anyway, because of what we do, because it can be quite, isolated at times, and other
Mm.
types of therapists as well, and other helping professions. You know, it's so important that we have a sense of community. And I know for counsellors and therapists in particular, it's also important at the moment, in the current sort of economic climate, and also with the current shifts going on in terms of, you know, how people want their therapy and things like that. Everything is changing so much, that collaboration, I think, and community is just really important. It's an important part of life design, I would say.
Yeah, I think one of the things, to think about is if you are working face to face, can I, and you're not working every day, can I share an office with somebody? Can we
Mm,
share rent? Can we, all of those sort of things, I would class as part of lifestyle design, just thinking more broadly. So I think there are ways to make certain things happen. It's just about being creative and bringing that into, the whole kind of thought process. So you want to be logical, you want to be creative and kind of balance the two of those out.
mm, mm. Yes, and you just mentioned about being creative there. And that's something that we often chat about, isn't it? How important creativity can be for our well-being, and how, often in our roles we can almost think, oh, there's not space for creativity. I just need to be professional and whatever. But what would you say about bringing creativity into your working life, either through sort of being creative in terms of designing our life, or how we can actually bring um, bring creativity into the things that we do?
I would start off by saying that I've been happiest in the jobs where I've been most myself. And I feel like part of me is being a creative person. So there have been certain jobs where there have been certain challenges and we've had to think, okay, how do we navigate this? And just coming up with an idea for, a way that we could work with children in a particular, children who are struggling with a particular thing. So I work in mental health, children who found it difficult to open up and start talking in certain sessions or to reflect on certain things. What kind of worksheets could I design? What kind of games could I play that bring out these thoughts or ideas or even information that I need to get from these children. I think and I think we talked a bit about burnout before. I think one of the reasons people burn out is because they don't bring in some of these things. So whether it's how you work with your clients or how you set things up in terms of your day to day, if you just get very, very bored being in one place all the time, thinking, okay, every month could I work from a different setting, or those kind of things. It's creativity. It doesn't feel like it because you haven't produced a picture, but actually it is you creating the setting or the scene or whatever, however you want to imagine it. So I think just thinking about all the different things you do day to day that are creative, that could be a place to start. Like people who feel that they're not naturally creative, just look at some of the changes you've made recently or the ways you solve problems. And I think that will pull out of you the fact that you are creating ideas all the time. And a lot of the time you're following through with certain things. So it is within you. And I think if we start from actually, I am a creative being, and then work from there, we will bring in so many changes that will surprise even us.
Yes. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that especially when times are hard, actually, we can forget that we're creative beings. And
Yeah.
I do think that it's important to remember that. And actually, sometimes it can be the thing that either sort of saves us from burnout, or it can ignite sort of exciting projects or something
Mm.
like that. And you've also, in talking about burnout again, you've reminded me of something that I wanted to pick up on, which is that I think often we think that burnout is as a result of doing too much, working too many hours, that kind of thing, which absolutely it is. But I also think that it can be about how we're actually doing things. That actually we might be, going back to values again. We might be burned out because we haven't been sticking to our values. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
No, I fully agree. I think lack of fulfillment actually leads to more burnout than physical exhaustion or any other cause, really. I mean, sometimes it's due to dynamics in the workplace and all these other things, but I think it comes down to the way I'm working, where I'm working, how I'm working, who I'm working with doesn't fulfill me in some way or another. And I think that's why we need to design our lives because if we don't have some kind of say in how we do all of those things or how we address all those areas, then we are going to find ourselves stuck and feeling like, is there a way out? Is there a way that I can still do this thing in a different way and stay? Or does it need to be a case of me going? And I'm not going to start this whole conversation about leaving jobs or, changing things up in that way, because I know we're both very passionate about it and we'll talk about that for the whole time. But yeah, that's also another thing for people who, maybe you're a salaried counselor or therapist in a particular place and you're feeling like it doesn't match with your values, the way that they do business,
Mm.
or, those sort of things. That is an area to consider as well in terms of designing your life. Am I where I need to be and I just need to tweak a few things, or am I in an environment that is really detrimental to my well-being?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, I mean, working for organizations, without going into it too much, I'm sure it's something that will definitely be explored on future podcasts, but people can experience more moral injury when working for organizations, which is where the values don't match up to theirs, where might be the politics or actually things that are going on that you don't agree with. And I think that, sometimes we might look at it and think, oh, well, actually, um, I feel like, yes, I don't agree with everything that is going on here. However, I feel like I can make enough of a difference in my own little patch, and that doesn't impact me too much. But there might be other occasions where we think actually no, this impacts me
Mm,
far too much, and there is nothing that I can do about it. I've tried, and they're not listening, or it's systemic,
mm,
or what have you. And there may be some situations where people might think actually this is not sustainable for me on a
mm,
long-term basis. And I think it's important to acknowledge that's real.
mm.
And it's important, sort of, if we are feeling burnt out or unhappy in our role, to actually be on to sort of gauge what's going on and think, am I sort of over my limit here of what I can put up with?
No, I think those are really important considerations. Some things, can seep in almost like liquid crawling in,
Yeah,
and then some
agree.
are kind of gases you're breathing in. And I think it's really important to think, how is this impacting me? And then what am I putting out as a result of what's kind of seeping into me? Because all of that makes a difference to how we work.
Yes, yes, absolutely, and has such an impact on our well-being, and motivation, and even sort of, personal relationships outside work. This podcast going out in January, and there's kind of a lot of people maybe thinking about the upcoming year, maybe feeling like, oh, things have just got to change. My life's exhausting me, whatever it is. What's the top tip that you would give to anybody who feels like that right now?
I would say sit down one day when things are not too busy. You've got about an hour to yourself. Have a cup of tea, be comfortable, and write out what your ideal day would be, in terms of a work day. What time would you wake up in the morning? What activities would you be doing in the morning in terms of, would you exercise? Would you meditate or pray? Would you journal? Would you have your shower in the morning? Would you have breakfast? Literally think the whole day through. And then, how many clients would you be seeing in during that day? When would you begin? When would you end? How much of a break would you have in the middle? And really just kind of get yourself into that mind space, really see it. And then after thinking about your ideal day, think about what your ideal week would look like. And, would it just be a repeat of that one day 5 times a week? Would it be 4 days a week? Really think, where am I trying to go? And I think that's where I would say to start. And then you start to make the teeny, teeny, teeny changes that edge you towards that. And every time you make one of those changes, it's a win. You're not going to get there straight away unless your lifestyle is already pretty much how you want it to be. But I think knowing that you know what you want is already a win. And then starting to make small changes. And bit by bit, I think you can get to a point where you are really satisfied with the way that you're living your life. For some people, that is something they can do quite easily on their own. And for other people, they might think they need some coaching or, a good conversation with a friend or fellow therapist. It could be something that's done in a group setting, even, sitting around thinking about vision boards or vision weeks or, those sort of things. So that's an idea for anybody who wants to gather people together. But yeah, that's where I would say I'd start.
Wonderful. So, lots of ideas there, not just the one. So, thank you for that. Lots for people to try, depending on where they're at right now. Thank you. And so, it's been so lovely speaking to you today. I just have one more thing to ask you that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast. So, designing our lives is the ultimate form of self-care, but sometimes we need to start with the small things. What's your favourite self-care act at the moment?
I'd say it is listening to audiobooks, whilst not doing anything else, because I did used to listen to them when I was really busy and rushing, and I wouldn't always take in what
Mm,
I was reading. And now I've kind of built in a practice of just kind of lying down or sitting down and really imagining the story. And it kind of takes me back to childhood when I'm able to envision the characters and, really listen to the voices that are being used for the audiobook. So I would say that. I would say designing my life is the second part of me kind of self-caring and building a life that I want has been instrumental. But actually, if I strip it down, what I wanted to create time for was actually just reading my books. And I said that
mm,
as a child, I was like, when I grow up, I just want to be able to read in peace, no interruptions, just enjoy it. And I feel
mm,
like I'm there in that sense at the moment.
yeah. Beautiful. And I think it is about sort of being honest with ourselves about that. So, okay, what is it that I really want? I'd like to be able to read in peace.
Mhm.
And that's absolutely fair enough. And so, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I completely understand it, but we might think, oh, it's not grand enough, it's not this enough, and it's
Mm,
not that enough. But actually, if that's what you want, it's important to acknowledge
yeah.
that. And also, when you were talking about to actually listen to the books properly, as opposed to when you're sort of rushing around doing things. I think that's really important. It's so important to be mindful when we're doing these things. So whether that's listening to an audiobook or doing our sort of 10 minutes of yoga at the end of the day, or whether it's speaking to a friend and having coffee. It's just, that is our time. And it's so really important to immerse ourselves in that and be mindful rather than sort of spend that time sort of, well, oh, I should be doing something else, or thinking about what we've got to do tomorrow or whatever it is.
Yeah, I would say even timetable nothing into your timetable. Like literally, this is my period to do nothing. This is my period to
Mm,
listen to audiobook. Because I think we make it a thing when we put it into our calendars or our diaries. And without it, anybody else's plan or, wish for us during that period, we kind of prioritize that. But I think if you put into your diary, I'm gonna lay around and be a bum for this, this whole day or this half day. I think that is good for us. It shows us that we are a priority.
yes, yes. Make that time non-negotiable.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you today, Eleanor.
You too.
Um, and I'm sure you will be back again, because there's lots of subjects that we can talk about together that will be really good for people to hear about. So, thanks ever so much, and I will speak to you soon.
Okay, thank you so much as well.